Today on Listen Up, Canada gets tough on crime. We'll find out how next. Welcome to Listen Up. I'm Lorna Dueck. Criminal justice. Those who work in the field say it's all about building safer communities, but there are different opinions on how that should be done. Insisting the scales of justice have become unbalanced, Canada's federal government has recently been making moves to get tougher on crime. So today, we're digging into this issue from our Christian perspective. Later in the show, we'll hear from one of our own, a staff member who spent 9 years in prison for a violent gang-related crime. And we'll hear about Christian resources being poured into Canada's prisoners and prisons. But first, Ricky Ratliff caught up with Canada's Public Safety Minister and Public Safety critic to learn more about what's driving the changes at the government level.
To become
it's opposition from the start.
Workers.
Well, the reality is, and we look at the statistics from Statistics Canada, is that crime is on the decline.
Well, in fact, the crime rate is going up. What is happening is that the crime reported to police is going down.
The sources are conflicting.
But if we are actually to look at victimization surveys, which I believe are a more accurate indication of crime in a particular neighborhood or indeed a country, you would see that crime, and especially violent crime, is rising.
The solutions seem worlds apart.
Well, the first thing we need to do is talk to communities. You know, allow community leaders to come forward and develop crime prevention plans. And we've seen extremely successful plans in places like Summerside PEI or in Kitchener-Waterloo, where they bring together not just police, not just not-for-profit organizations, but faith groups and others.
In today's prison system, parole, for example, is granted as of right, mandatory release at 2/3. After 1/3 of your sentence, most prisoners are virtually all eligible for release, with the exception of certain individuals who are serving mandatory minimum prison sentences. So our government's philosophy in that respect is very clear. Parole is not a right, it is something you earn.
Prime Minister Stephen Harper continued the conversations on crime reform in his address to Canadians on YouTube.
When serious crimes are committed, people expect the penalties to match these crimes. And obviously, you know, for 40 years, our criminal justice system was going in a very different direction. We were, you know, there were these arguments that told people somehow if you don't punish criminals, that crime will go away. I've never quite understood the philosophy, but I think people understand that that approach has not been effective.
And so drastic measures have been taken to get the job done.
People, quite frankly, are fed up with the crime and the fact that criminals can burn down your house but go home to their own house on house arrest. And we simply don't think that certain types of crimes are suitable for house arrest. I can point to case after case of where the Liberals have stood in the way. One of the reasons we prorogued Parliament, of course, was to reconstitute the committees in the Senate. Had we not prorogued Parliament, we couldn't have reconstituted the committees to take into account the new Conservative senators that came into the Senate, and that then makes our ability to get legislation through the Senate much easier. Now, with having effective control of the Senate, although not a majority, we believe that a lot of the legislation can be moved through fairly quickly.
Well, the idea that they canceled all their crime bills so that they could pass them strikes me as a little strange.
In the Tories' move to introduce reforms for stricter sentencing, they also put the brakes on passing out pardons so permissively in the wake of recent scandals. But for the opposition,
I had to go to the parliamentary budget officer and ask him to study the cost of these government's bills. And let's take one, C-25, which is 2-for-1 remand credit. The government, Vic Taves, said the cost was going to be $90 million, period. Now, under threat of a PBO report, which is going to be out any day, suddenly they change it to $2 billion. You take the pardon issue, where they talked about very recently the need to shut the door on people like Mr. James getting a pardon. Well, Grant James, I don't want to see him get a pardon. Of course not. Nobody does. But why didn't they fix this 4 years ago?
But the reforms don't stop there. Toughening up the Youth Criminal Justice Act is next on the Conservatives' agenda. But critics argue bills like this one toss away the potential for reform in a young offender.
What we need to be able to do is get at those base issues. Have they been subject to violence themselves? Do they have a drug addiction issue that maybe come through internal pain and feeling lost, not knowing where they're going in their life? How do we reach out and help connect those young people to a better path?
Let's be frank, these youth are criminals. They are committing criminal acts, and our goal is to once they are into the criminal justice system, to deal with them there.
If the government actually gets it right, in some ways you won't even notice it. You'll just wake up one morning in a safer community with less victims and a community that's more healthy.
My primary responsibility is the public safety. That is my primary responsibility. The secondary concern of our government is the rehabilitation of criminals, whether they are older or younger. Rehabilitation is important, but make no mistake about it, public safety is our primary concern.
The needs of Canada's prisons and prisoners when we return. But first, Sister Helen Prejean is an author and death penalty activist in the United States. She was recently in Toronto and shared these thoughts.
And there's a journey of the heart involved. There's a conversion journey. The gospel of Jesus stretches us. If we think of the perpetrator on one arm of this cross and the victim's family on the other, and how can we be there for both?